In the world of boutique Blu-rays and physical media collecting, Arrow Video is one of the biggest and most well-respected labels out there. They put out a lot of really cool popular titles like Inglourious Basterds and The Warriors. I got their chunky boxes here. They're really cool. But I think Arrow Video is most well known for their library of cult horror titles. One of the genres that they do put out movies every now and then for that I think is a little bit overlooked is their crime, thriller, and drama movies. So in today's video, I want to just go over 3 titles that I picked up recently that kind of fall within those genres that I think are overlooked. Let's get into it. So the first title I want to talk about is Black Sunday, and this is from 1977. It's directed by John Frankenheimer, and it's based on the Thomas Harris novel of the same name. It stars Robert Shaw of Jaws fame, Bruce Dern, and Martha Keller. And this is a political crime thriller with some spy elements. And a good bit of action. The story is inspired by the massacre at the 1972 Summer Olympics in Munich. Our main protagonist is David Kabakov. He's an Israeli anti-terrorist special agent played by Robert Shaw on a mission to thwart a terrorist attack on American soil. In parallel, we also follow 2 main villains. Dahlia, a member of a terrorist organization, Black September, and Michael Lander, an unstable Vietnam War veteran who spent several years as a prisoner of war. Essentially, it's a race against the clock game of cat and mouse. Dahlia and Lander plan to use an improvised explosive device over a large crowd at a football game using a TV crew blimp to deploy the weapon. Landers was a pilot in the war, and his regular job is flying these blimps over football games. It's unclear if Dahlia is just using him as a means to an end here, but they do appear to have some sort of romantic relationship. Kabakov works with the FBI and other agencies to track down Dahlia and stop this plan after he regrettably lets her live in an action-heavy raid at the beginning of the film. If I can get this video recorded and edited tonight, it'll be very topical because tomorrow is actually the Super Bowl, and the third act of this film actually takes place entirely at and around the Super Bowl. With the cooperation of the NFL, portions of this film were actually filmed during Super Bowl X in 1976. One of my favorite things about this film is the fact that it takes the time to explain the motivations of the terrorist plot. I wouldn't say it goes as far as to justify their actions, but I do think it does a really good job of explaining why these people are doing what they're doing. I think a lesser film would probably portray Dahlia and Lander as just, kind of run-of-the-mill, evil, mastermind Bond villains. I hesitate to say the film asks the audience to sympathize with the villains because their plot is pretty much as nefarious and evil as they come. But I do really enjoy when a movie allows the viewer to understand why a villain is a villain, and I think it makes for a much more interesting and contemplative experience overall. Now, the movie does run close to 2.5 hours, but I was never bored. I think Shaw, Dern, and Keller all give great performances. I love all the light spycraft elements. I was always intrigued throughout the entire runtime. There are some great shootout and action sequences, and it all culminates at that big, the football game. It's a great set piece with the blimp, and yeah, I would highly recommend this if you're into crime thrillers, political, terrorist type movies, stuff like that. I think this is a really good movie, and I think more people need to check it out. The next title I have here is Fear is the Key, and this is from 1972. It's directed by Michael Tuchner, I think is how you pronounce his name. And yeah, it's a highly entertaining action thriller movie. So we start off with our lead, John Talbot, who's played by Barry Newman, communicating over radio with another man and woman flying a plane as that plane is being shot down. So I was immediately a little confused with this opening scene because John is not in any military uniform or anything like that, so the plane being shot down is clearly not being shot down in a war zone. So after this confusing opening, the film follows John on a wild crime spree where he starts a fight with police, gets arrested, and then kidnaps a woman in court and makes an ultra-violent escape, shooting another officer in the process. John and his new captive lead the police on a long, drawn-out Starsky and Hutch-esque car chase. From this scene, you would probably think that Talbot is some sort of professional getaway driver and, professional criminal. By the end of the sequence, you're really not a big fan of Talbot. He just does not seem like a good guy. When John and his captive finally evade the police and the chase is over, the woman makes an attempt to flee, and she's grabbed by this mysterious new character, Jablonski.
Quiet, honey, quiet, and we got him.
Jablonski informs John that his captive's name is Sarah, and she's actually the daughter of a big-time oil businessman, and he plans on turning them both in to the oil man for a hefty reward. I think it's safe to say, without spoiling too much, that the film does eventually come back around to that opening scene, and it does explain what happened with the plane being shot down, and as John's motivations are revealed, I think the audience's opinion of our lead will eventually change. Now, if I had to give one complaint for this movie, I will say that this shift or the twist does kind of uncover some things and reveal some things that do kind of make the story a little bit unbelievable. It's very far-fetched when you find out what's actually going on here, but I did still find the movie to be pretty exciting and tense, and some of the stuff that I didn't talk about that would be spoilers. There are some very cool scenes, especially the end of this movie is very cool. Now, if you plan on checking out Fear is the Key, I would highly recommend that you do not go on IMDb to read the plot synopsis. It definitely gives away more of the movie than I would have wanted to know going into it. But yeah, I think Fear is the Key is a really cool 70s action, crime thriller. And yeah, I would say that it's probably underseen, so check it out if you get the opportunity. All right, and the last title I have to talk about is Fighting Back from 1982. This is directed by Louis Teague, who also did Alligator, Cujo, and Navy SEALs. Now, this is a tragically underseen vigilante justice revenge movie, and I think it's underappreciated. Out of 10 million plus active users on Letterboxd, this movie has only been logged 1,000 times and reviewed 255 times. The main protagonist, John D'Angelo, is played by Tom Skerritt, who you probably know from Alien and Top Gun. I did find the film a little bit uncomfortable to watch in the beginning. Nearly all the villains in the beginning of the movie, at least, are non-white characters. I think it's pretty well known that Hollywood's portrayal of minorities has kind of been like a dark cloud hovering over the entire business for a long time, and especially back then in the 70s, it was kind of a big problem. This movie is, in the beginning at least, kind of a perfect example of all that, until the introduction of Yaphet Kotto's character. You probably recognize him from Alien as well.
I'll talk to you. I'll tell you this right to your face. These statistics and these crimes you're talking about that are being committed by people who live below the poverty line, these people happen to be black people, so don't come in here talking.
Hey, wait a minute. Punks,
I'm telling you.
Punks are punks. Whether you're punks or my punks.
I'm telling you to your
punks
face.
Don't have no color.
I'm telling you to your face, we are not talking about punks. We are talking about black people. And the problem is a lot more serious than punks.
But once his character is introduced, the racial politics of the film kind of changed a little bit, and they point a finger directly at the protagonist, John D'Angelo. He calls him out straight up, says you're a racist, and I think that's really needed in a hyper-violent vigilante justice film like this. So the hyper-violence kicks off pretty much right away. In the very beginning of the movie, we see John D'Angelo and his family driving home from a party, and they witness a pimp beating up a woman on the side of the road. So D'Angelo's wife speaks up and tries to intervene in this conflict that's happening on the side of the road. A struggle ensues, followed by a car chase, which ends in a car crash that puts D'Angelo's pregnant wife in the hospital and ultimately kills their unborn child. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, while Mrs. D'Angelo is still in the hospital, John's mother is brutally attacked in a drugstore robbery gone wrong, and this is one of the most intense scenes of violence that you see in the movie, and the fact that it happens to John's elderly mother is just brutal, and it's just an awful scene. John, understandably so, is outraged at this, and he's frustrated with the police and their inability to keep their community safe. So John takes it upon himself to get together with his friends and neighbors and start this neighborhood safety watch patrol. Together with his merry band of neighborhood vigilantes, John takes the law into his own hands and starts cleaning up the streets. But the story becomes much more interesting than than, your average everyman vigilante justice flick. Shortly after this neighborhood watch is formed, John and his group start kind of gaining notoriety. And we get this very interesting subplot where a paranoid politician becomes worried that John will make a play for his seat, and the politician plots with the police commissioner to end John's quest for justice. I found this section of the movie fascinating because, as far as we know, John has no desire to become political. His motivations, at least at the start, are simply to clean up his town enough so that his wife won't make them pack up and leave. Before the end of the film, we also find John entangled, at least briefly, with the mafia. John discovers at one point that a local gangster is selling drugs to kids, and we get this incredible Godfather-esque scene where he gets permission from one of the mob's leaders to kick this lowlife drug dealer's ass. It's pretty cool. And this scene is great. The drug dealer runs his operation out of this chicken restaurant that John confronts him in. And when the dealer realizes that he no longer has the protection of the mob, he kind of scurries in the back of the restaurant and he comes back out with what looks like an old battle axe. But it really does him no good. John still whoops his ass pretty easily. So yeah, Fighting Back is nearly as violent as its exploitation inspirations, but it has a little bit more to say in the long run. All these elements of, the racial stuff, the political stuff, the mafia stuff, it all adds just enough flavor to make the movie something special in my opinion. If you haven't seen it and you're into, gritty, vigilante, justice, revenge type movies, I would definitely say Fighting Back is worth checking out. All right, there you have it, folks. 3 what I would consider underrated, underseen crime, thriller, action movies put out by Arrow Video. I definitely would suggest any of these 3 if you're into those kinds of movies. And yeah, thanks for watching the video. I'll catch you in the next one.